Hey guys, Martin here bringing another Dragon Ball Z Dokkan battle video, and so today we are going to be talking about my recommendations for the best hidden potential builds for all three of the summonable part 2 units: Beast Gohan, the AGL Krillin and 18, and the Int LR Gamma 1 and 2. I did a video talking about the part 1 units before the start of the anniversary, and we did talk about the LR Beerus and the free-to-play Frieza in that video as well, even though obviously they don't actually get their full awakenings and easy A's and everything until a little bit later on in the anniversary. So if you did want advice on the builds for them, do go back and check out that video from part 1. But today, as I say, we are going to be talking about the 3 new units that have hit global today. I should really have got this video out yesterday, but I was a bit disorganized, what with errands and stuff that I had to run, and then sorting out like the watch party, which shout out to anyone who came out and watched the superhero movie with us in the Discord. That was awesome. But yeah, we'll get this video up today. A lot of people asked me in the stream, because of course people who got lucky with their summons and pulled dupes want some ideas on the hidden potential builds. So we'll start off with the main man himself, of course, the LR Beast Gohan. So there's a couple of things to take into account when it comes to his hidden potential build. So he raises defense for 1 turn, as well as greatly raising attack on his 12 key super. So it means any additional supers that he gets, he's going to be greatly raising that attack as well as the defense for the turn. He does have, as part of his passive, that once he's received an attack before he attacks, if he's in slot 1 or if he's used his target ability or there's an AoE, he does a guaranteed additional. So that's the only way he can do an additional from his passive. So if there's no attacks in slot 1 and he doesn't have his target ability yet, he's not going to get hit in slot 1, so he's only going to do 1 super. So I think additional in the hidden potential for this guy is really, really useful. And when we take a look at his kit, remember that he's getting 40% crit chance for 5 turns as part of his intro buff. Then he also gets 20% crit chance if key is 24. So that gives him 60 straight off the bat. And then also, regardless of whether his intro buff is active or not, he also gets 20% crit within the same turn with each attack received. So if you're within the intro buff, which is 40%, and he gets the 24 key, he already has 60%. If he gets hit twice before he attacks, depending on how many attacks there's going to be in slot 1, or again, if you're using his target ability and he's taking all the attacks from the turn, then there are going to be a whole load of situations where he's just going to have a 100% chance to crit. And then bearing in mind that he is an STR unit, so he already gets a free level 5 crit as part of his free dupe hidden potential at 55%, that means that he already has that separate 10% crit chance built into his kit, regardless of whether you got dupes or not. So realistically, that level 5 crit that he gets for being an STR unit, I would say that's the only crit that you want to give him, and then put the rest into additional. Now, when it comes to the secondary ability, because obviously if you make as many of his nodes, not even talking about skill orbs here, because you can use those to balance out his stats however you want. He is going to get the unique ones from the anniversary event when that comes out in a little bit later, towards the end of the anniversary. That'll be out fairly soon. You of course can give him EX skill orbs now, because then when you replace them with the other ones, you do get to keep them. But when it comes to his secondary ability, so any nodes that are going to be like crit or dodge, then it comes down to the decision of whether to give him that bit of extra crit, which in some situations can be wasted, or to give him dodge. And dodge is an interesting one for this guy, because obviously I have been throughout the years a proponent of giving free dodge to most characters. Some characters, especially defensive units like Gohan, who of course is very, very tanky. A lot of people like to give some dodge to them. And it's kind of two sides of the argument for this Beast Gohan having dodge, because in the current meta on global, unless you're in a really sticky situation where like the intro buff has run out and like you're against like the final phase, maybe you've used the target ability, although of course on that turn he gets a massive defensive buff, Gohan's not really taking damage from a lot of things in the game. So dodge is not necessarily an ability that he needs to have in order to make sure that he doesn't die. However, there are a couple of reasons why dodge could be good for him. And then there is one negative, which we'll go into afterwards. But a couple of reasons why dodge could be good for this guy is we've seen with a couple of the new Blue Zone stages that have come out, as well as the ones that we'll be releasing a bit later on, and of course the movie event stages, a lot of bosses now are either stunning or sealing you with their super attack, and will super attack in slot 1 fairly often. So the big problem is, and this is something we found with doing the heroes runs against like SSBE, UI, that kind of thing, is that Limit Breaker Vegito is our slot 1 unit, but also our main damage dealer. So if he gets super attacked in slot 1, we don't die, but then he gets stunned or sealed, and then he can't be delivering that big damage that we want. And so, of course, the big issue for Beast Gohan is you put him in slot 1, and then he gets super attacked and gets stunned or sealed, and then he's not bringing that big damage that he's capable of doing. So in that instance, dodge for him actually would be quite useful, because then obviously you have a chance to dodge that super attack that would stun or seal him. And of course, as somebody mentioned in the stream earlier today, you are kind of future-proofing him, because it's going to probably take a little while, but once bosses start hitting even harder than they are now, then there will be situations where Beast Gohan will be taking some damage from these big super attacks and stuff like that. So then at least you've got his hidden potential set, and you don't need to suddenly change it in the future when all of a sudden we get like a new meta shift and then his defense isn't quite good enough, which I think will take a while, right? This guy is obviously powerful enough, well designed enough, like certain turns he's getting 80% damage reduction, so it's going to take some time before those kind of bosses start to appear in the game. But that's more of a minor positive, is that you are kind of future-proofing him a little bit. However, the negative is, of course, as we were talking about with his additional, is that he gets an additional super attack, as well as giving allies 3 ki, when he receives an attack. And so then, of course, that means if, say, there's only one attack in slot 1, and you put Beast Gohan in slot 1, if you've given him additional, but then you've given him like 9 dodge, 12 dodge, something like that, and then he dodges that one attack in slot 1, he then does not get his buff for being hit. And unless you're using the active skill on that turn, then you've got no other chances that he's going to get hit before he attacks. So if you've only given him a little bit of dodge, like say he has 9 dodge because you've given him the rest into additional, it's only a 9% chance, which is one of those things. It's the same reasoning behind giving a unit a level 3 dodge, is that could come in clutch exactly when you need it for like a big super, and it's less likely to come in, you know, like every turn, and he's going to constantly dodge that attack that you really wanted to hit him to give him the buff. But that is something that you have to be aware of. Even giving him the smallest amount of dodge, you are running that risk that he dodges the single attack in slot 1 and doesn't get his start of turn buffs. So I think as long as you're not giving him a crazy amount of dodge, that's not going to happen that often, and he's a powerful enough unit that I don't think it really matters too much. If you miss the occasional turn where he doesn't get hit in slot 1 first, it's not going to be the end of the world. So when it comes to this guy, I would say for his hidden potential, you want to give him additional as his main ability. So every single node that you can choose additional, I would choose additional. And then for me personally, I do think any extra crit that you give him is pretty much wasted, so I would put the remaining nodes into dodge, which I think there is only, when you look at both the like the bottom right and the top left, I think there's only 2 nodes that are like crit or dodge. So he's going to end up having what, 15 additional and 6 dodge. So I think that is a pretty good build for him if he's without you know, applying the skill orbs. And then you can always try him out for a bit. I like to do this with units where I test them out for a bit and then I put the skill orbs on them, because once I've seen how well they're performing with the build that I've already given them, I can kind of decide what I want to do, right? Like if you find that he's dodging way too much, then you give him skill orbs that don't give him any extra dodge at all. Or if you find that he's like never dodging, or you know, he's getting an additional every single turn but never dodging, then you could give him skill orbs that focus a little bit more on dodge, but that's up to you and your personal preference. I would just say, again, when it comes to dodge, be wary of giving him too much in case he is then not getting that hit before he attacks buff. So that's something to be aware of. But full additional and then a bit of dodge. No crit necessary, but you can always put it in if you don't want to give him dodge. I've seen people, you know, we've all seen how like level 5 dodge in full power Super Saiyan 4 Goku will end up dodging that 5th attack that he needs for his standby. So a lot of people don't like to give any dodge to these types of characters that want to take hits. So I have seen people go full additional and then just put the rest into crit, just so that he's not dodging these attacks. But I do think a little bit of dodge is good for all the reasons that we mentioned. So if we take a look at the Krillin and 18, pretty straightforward one for them. They greatly raise attack and defense for 1 turn on super, as well as lowering attack. So they do have a very good super attack effect. However, they are a unit who is there for support, and basically is kind of their defensive capability is all built around dodge. They have a medium chance to dodge, and then as long as you have a superhero ally attacking in the same turn, they get an extra 30% chance to dodge. So they have 60% chance to dodge, and then they build up attack and defense with each attack evaded. So ideally you do want them to be dodging attacks right from the very start. Ideally the very first like 3 attacks you want them to dodge, so they then get their full passive built up. Of course they do have a bit of extra attack and defense before attacking, so they can be kind of good in slot 1 as long as they're not taking these big hits straight away. So should be pretty obvious where we're going with this one, but these guys absolutely are a full dodge character. They give superclass allies a bunch of support, and it's for 2 turns as long as HP is 50% or more at the start of the turn. So you can use them as a floating support unit. They're going to be supporting the rotation they're on as well as the following rotation as well. And as I always say, you know, if you watch the part 1 video, I said it in that at least once, floating support units have 2 things that they need to do: support the team and not die. So supporting the team is what they do from their passive, not dying. I mean, they have the dodge in their passive, but they don't have guard, they don't have damage reduction. If they're not dodging like a big boss super attack, then they're going to get killed. So full dodge is going to be the way to go. Remember, without skill orbs, you can only get a full ability to 15 if it's not the one that they started with. Like, so an int unit can get to 20 dodge. So that means these guys will have 15 dodge, and then I would put the rest into additional because of their hidden potential ability. As we said, because they're on the team to support and not die, they're not there to do damage. So you can give them crits if you want, so they can get the potential to crit and do a little bit of extra damage on their supers. But any crit you give them is taking away from their chance to dodge, and then secondarily their chance to do an additional. Because if they do an additional super, they greatly raise their attack and defense again, as well as lowering attack again if we're fighting one of the bosses that can actually be attack lowered. So because they're an AGL unit, they start with level 5 additional anyway, which means if you give them only like full dodge and then the rest in additional, they'll end up with 15 dodge and 11 additional. You could give them a little bit more additional than dodge, because they do in the ideal scenario have 60% dodge anyway, but those 2 things are calculated separately. So if the 60% dodge chance fails and you've only given them like 6 dodge, then their secondary chance to dodge is only 6%. So I would probably say full dodge, which would be, like I say, 15 dodge, 11 additional, and then using hidden potential orbs, you can give them a little bit more additional and potentially a little bit more dodge depending on which skill orbs you have. But these guys, as a floating support unit, should be no surprise, full dodge and then the rest additional, because they have a good super attack effect. If their super attack effect was completely pointless and didn't raise defense, then you could probably go full dodge and then some crit, just to make sure that like the one super they are doing of the turn has a potential to do a bit more damage. But it's the super attack effect you want to be repeated, not them doing an additional so they can do more damage. You realistically are wanting the additional super so that you're getting the greatly raised defense again. And then last but not least, we have LR Gamma 1 and 2. Now these guys, after I did the 55% showcase, they are very much not a slot 1 unit, especially in their initial form. They do raise attack and defense on their 12 key super, so additionals obviously are going to be good for them. And if you're picking up the 2 int orbs, and this applies throughout their various different forms, if you're picking up the 2 int orbs, they are picking up a decent amount of chance to crit. So crit is not necessarily the most important for them. Gamma 1 does get mostly damage reduction. I don't think he gets crit chance as well, and it can go up to 100% with the int or STR orbs obtained. So he gets 20% crit chance per int or STR orb, and he creates int orbs. So again, with the Gammas, very similarly to Beast, they have abilities to crit built into their hidden potential system. So built into their passive. So in the hidden potential system, you don't necessarily need to give them any crit. You give them a little bit if you want, so that obviously they have the slightly higher chance. If you're unable to get in orbs with them, you can get the AGL or STR orbs, which do give them 12% crit chance. Well, it'll be 12% per orb, so it would be 24% if you do get the 2 orbs. With the int orbs, it's 60%. So realistically, as long as you can grab 2 int orbs with them, you're getting 2 additional supers and a 60% chance to crit. Don't really need more crit if you've already got 60%, right? Now, they're an int unit, so they get level 5 dodge for free. Now, the big thing, we went through that whole discussion with Beast and dodging. If we take a look at these guys' abilities, both in the standby mode and in the once you finally exchanged into Gamma 1, none of their abilities revolve around them being hit. Gamma 1, especially once you get into this final phase, has a lot of damage reduction, although his start of turn defense isn't the craziest. So if you find yourself in a situation where you end up needing or wanting to use these guys in slot 1, you ideally are going to want them to get hit as little as possible. So I do think that dodge for these guys is actually very good. I wouldn't necessarily say that they are a full dodge unit, but they can be used as a support as well, because they're giving support to 3 different categories with their passive. Once you get to the Gamma 1 final exchange, he raises superclass allies defense by 50% for 2 turns, which means he's supporting even the rotation that he's not on. So he's not quite in that situation where he's a support unit that needs dodge, otherwise he's getting obliterated, but I think dodge is definitely good for him. And then additional is really good because of the hidden potential system. So because he's an int unit and has dodge to start off with, I feel like you could probably go full additional, which would be 15, and then the dodge, because he has that 5 to start with, means he would be 15 additional and 11 dodge. And then of course you do get the unique skill orbs from the movie event that's on at the moment. So you could of course balance out the abilities based on the ones that those are giving you. So when it comes to the gammas, I would say again, crit not necessary because of the amount of crit they get from their passive. So then realistically, it's just up to you in terms of personal preference. You either go dodge as the main ability with additional as the secondary, or additional as the main one with dodge as the secondary. Because Gamma 1 is able to do a pretty decent amount of damage, so getting that additional super is obviously going to contribute a lot to that as well. And dodge is going to help them out when it comes to the harder hitting super attacks in the game. So gammas, either dodge or additional as the primary, and then the other one as the secondary. Krillin and 18, dodge primarily and then additional, and then Beast Gohan, as much additional as you can give him, and then it's up to you if you want to give him some dodge, help him with the future proofing and maybe not getting stunned in slot 1 by some of these bosses, but you got to be aware that he could dodge the only attack in slot 1, so I leave that up to your preference. So that is going to be it for the video, guys. This has been the Masked Ningen. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Check out all the links below for the Discord, the merch store, all that good stuff, and I will see you all again soon. Have a good one.